It wasn't too long ago that I brought you an interview with Dr. Chris Bessent, who is an integrative veterinarian. She created the Herbsmith line. So she is very into traditional Chinese medicine and how herbs can help the body. Chinese herbs is what she works with. She also created the Simple Food Project and Medicus veterinary diets. And we had her on the Pet Health Junkies podcast. Now, I know that a lot more people listen to this podcast, the Pet Parenting Reset, than do Pet Health Junkies. There's going to be some overlap, but this was such an incredible interview. We had so many amazing nuggets of information that I want to make sure that everybody possible gets to hear it. So we talked mainly about veterinary diets. So we were talking about Medicus veterinary diets, but we really get into the why. We really get into, okay, your veterinarian, your traditional veterinarian, Western veterinarian is saying your animal has XYZ disease or whatever is going on, and they need to be on this prescription food that generally they sell right there in the office and is very expensive. Oftentimes, as I mentioned in the podcast, oftentimes the ingredient panel on these prescription or veterinary diets is way worse than whatever ultra processed food you're feeding. And oh my goodness, if you happen to be one of those people who's feeding an amazing, beautiful, species appropriate diet, whether that's gently cooked or raw, and then your veterinarian says, no, your pet needs to be on this prescription diet, you have to be looking at those ingredient panels going, what in the world do you scratching your head? But at the same time, there's so much fear involved, right? I've been there. You're so worried that you're going to do something wrong and make things worse. So we talk about all of that. And this is such an important conversation for so many people because, and again, I say this in the interview with Dr. Bessent, more times than not, if we have a pet that's on an ultra processed food, that's the base of their diet. They're on this ultra processed food. Just by transitioning them to a fresh food diet, a species appropriate diet, whether that's gently cooked or whether that's raw, we can see huge improvements in health in disease states, sometimes completely reversing them. Granted, I'm not saying that that's always going to happen, but sometimes it does. Food is medicine, and food is that powerful. So, yes, there could be some times when a disease state is so advanced that we do need to make nutritional adjustments. And so that's where things like the Medicus veterinary diets can come into play. And again, we talk about using them for the period of time that we need to use them for and not longer, because they are nutritionally different from what we often think of as species appropriate, as biologically appropriate for our dogs or our cats. So I'm going to wind this up and play this interview for you with Dr. Chris Bessent. Again, it's myself, it's Janet Cesarini, who owns my local indie pet store, Popology, Pam Roussel from Perfectly Holistic, both really good friends of mine. We do the Pet Health Junkies podcast sometimes here and there, obviously not as routinely as I do this podcast. This one, you get an episode every single week. But because of that, I wanted to make sure that you're getting this. I have done so many incredible interviews and I have gotten so many nuggets of wisdom from so many people. And this one, I think, packs a punch in a different way that can really get to not just you and me as 2.0 pet parents, right? Like we may already know a lot of this, but the average pet parent who's just learning or who doesn't even know there's a whole other world out there. So I would really encourage you to share this interview with anybody that you know whose pet is on or being recommended one of these veterinary or prescription diets. This can be a game changer. I truly believe that this one interview could actually bring people over and help them understand how important food is. And hopefully they start realizing it for themselves too. But we're gonna start somewhere, right? Whether we start with them, whether we start with their pets, to me, like, this is my charge in life, is to wake people up to the reality of our society today. It is grim. It is not okay. And we have the power to change it. So let's get right into this episode with Dr. Chris Bessent. She, again, had already been on the Pet Parenting Reset. If this happens to be the first time you are listening to me and you're like, who is this lady? My name is Jessica. I am a certified canine nutritionist. I'm also a certified raw nutrition expert for both dogs and cats, and a holistic pet health coach. I could not be happier to bring this information to you every week. It is what gives me joy in life. And I hope that if you have not already followed the podcast, that you do so today. And please reach out to me on social media. Instagram is my favorite place to be. And let me know if any of these episodes have impacted you, including today's, because that just literally makes my day, and I will share it, and it just makes my day. So, Dr. Chris Bessent.
Welcome back, pet parent. One of the things that I see so often that not only breaks my heart, but I will admit I have gotten to the point where it angers me as well, is that, and I literally had a client email me this week. She had to take her cat to the vet. He had crystals in his urine and wasn't urinating as often as she would like. Took him to the emergency vet, and I felt like my heart sunk because I've literally been in that exact same place with a cat who was blocked, and the vet staff were telling her that if she did not put her cat on that prescription urinary kibble, that her cat was going to die. And I have been in that exact same place. And I know so many other people with so many other things going on with their pets. Their veterinarian is telling them, you have to have your pet on this exact prescription kibble for whatever is going on. And you feel like if you don't do it, you're killing your pet. And the reality is, in my opinion, that's not true. Oftentimes, if we are already feeding a kibble, switching to a whole fresh food diet can be enough. But there are also cases where adjusting the diet slightly based on whatever your pet is going through, whether it is cancer, whether it's urinary problems, whatever it may be, can be beneficial. But at the same time, those RX kibbles, the prescription, the veterinary diets, whatever they may be called, depending on the brand that your veterinarian sells, they're not really good food. Like, they're oftentimes, if you look at that label compared to the label of the food you were feeding prior to diagnosis, it's a lot worse in a lot of cases. And so Pam with Perfectly Holistic, Janet Cesarini with Pupology, and we are your Pet Health Junkies podcast. We are so excited to bring Dr. Chris Bessent to you today, because she is not only has been working decades as a veterinarian, she is the creator and founder of HerbSmith. She also has the Simple Food Project. And what we're going to be talking about a lot today is the Medicus veterinary diets that she has created. And I know that was painstaking for her, but she did it all with whole foods. And so thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Bessent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great opportunity because I think your story is so common. And I think that all the podcasters and the wonderful companies out there that are really promoting fresh food and real food and raw food have done such a great job on supporting health and wellness. But then what happens is if that pet gets sick, so let's say it's a kitty that has a bladder issue, all of a sudden, all that pet parent has learned kind of gets thrown out the window because you're so afraid. Mm-hmm. So when your vet says you need to use this kibble, urinary kibble, you know in your heart, when you read the ingredient deck, you would have never touched that food. You would have never fed that food any other time, but you're scared and you trust your veterinarian, and you find yourself walking out of the vet clinic with this bag of CD that is nothing that you would normally have fed. And I look at it as taking your plane of nutrition from really good down to terrible. That's the last thing that that animal needs. This is when they're sick, that's when they need whole food, fresh food, real food more than ever is when they're ill. And unfortunately, and God bless veterinarians, it's the only tool that they have. And I would say that it's easy for us to villainize the big pet food that produces like Science Diet and those sort of things. But I would say that Mark Morris, who started Science Diet and Hill's Diet, in the beginning, he was revolutionary. You know, in the beginning, he was one of the few veterinarians that said that food matters. Unfortunately, what's happened is they've gone from using good ingredients to the absolute worst ingredients.
Yes.
And so the idea that you need to modify nutrients according to their disease is really important and has been well proven to minimize the mortality of those pets. But I come in now and I say, we need to do it with fresh whole food. That we need to do the same thing that we've done to support health and wellness on a daily basis to dogs that are thriving and doing well. And we even more importantly need to do it when they're sick. And when they're sick, you absolutely can do the exact same thing that the prescription kibble diets do, but you can do it with whole food. So when we go through the diets today, you'll see that they're not always species appropriate. And they're not always species appropriate because it's more about the disease or the disharmony or the imbalance or issues that that animal has. So, for example, the kidney diet has rice in it, which normally all of us would be like, that's horrible. Why do you have rice in there? Dogs have no requirement for rice. But what they do have is in kidney disease, you can't properly flush phosphorus out of the system. So you need to feed a lower phosphorus diet. Unfortunately, meat has the highest content of phosphorus. So if you're trying to reduce the phosphorus in their food, you can't go with a species appropriate diet, a higher meat content, 70, 80, 90% meat, because then you're really high in phosphorus. So what we did is we added enough rice to drop the phosphorus level down to a reasonable level. But then even further, we added phosphorus binders to the diet.
Oh, nice.
So the cool part is we know that a dog or cat's kidney can't process phosphorus as well as it would if it was healthy. So there's two ways of going about it, decreasing the phosphorus in their blood. One is by the amount that we feed in their diet. So that hence we added some rice to it to decrease the phosphorus because meat is so high in phosphorus. But then we added ketocin and ground eggshell calcium carbonate as a phosphorus binder. So what they eat, a lot of the phosphorus stays in the gut and is excreted with the stool. So kind of, but we were able to do it with whole food. We were able to do it with chicken and with beef and with organ meats. And we did have to add some grains to it, but very healthy, wholesome, easily digestible grains. And then we added some things that like kidney patients are constantly drinking and urinating. So they lose a lot of phosphorus and they lose a lot of B vitamins. So we added those so that as they were losing more, we could increase the amount that they consume every day and make them feel better in the long run. So it was still using all the same principles of nutrient adjustment based on their disease, but do it with whole food. And that was the kicker. And then we put it in a freeze-dried base and a freeze-dried format so that we could preserve 97% of all of the nutrients of whole food.
I have a question for you. Is the cat Medicus diet the same as the dog?
isn't. It is geared more towards cats than it is towards dogs. So it's as high as meat content as I could get, but still being able to control the phosphorus level. And then we did add the ketocin. We added more salt to the diet, and that's a bit of a complaint of some people, that you're added sodium to the diet, and in a kidney that can't excrete sodium as well. But what we found is that if you have no sodium in it, cats will refuse to eat it. So then what happens? What I found is my pet parents in my veterinary practice would say, my cat won't eat it. So then they went back to their regular diet, which is kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So we needed to make sure that it was a little more palatable for fussy kitties. So it's a little higher in sodium, but I would also say if you go to the solid research behind it, the idea of lower sodium in a kidney patient really comes from human kidney evaluations, not really from any research that supports it for cats or for dogs.
Interesting.
So there's
That is interesting.
little tweaks that are more about the different species between cat and dog.
Does the feline diet have the grains in it too? Were
It
you
does.
supposed to take it? Okay.
Yep.
So it does a little bit
It does have some rice in it because we had
Yeah.
to.
to bring this.
The only, you guys will appreciate this. I literally remember the moment that I had tried every iteration to get phosphorus to a lower levels. I mean, no exaggeration. We've probably spent over $100,000 in testing
Wow.
to make sure that we could get it as close to the ideal as possible. And I remember having like 5 different iterations to try to, okay, let's go with meats that are lower in phosphorus. Let's go with fruits and vegetables that are lower in phosphorus. Let's do more phosphorus binders. All of these things, but I could never get the phosphorus content down to a reasonable level until I added rice. And it was like this balloon just burst. I was like, ugh, I can't believe I'm going to have to do this. But nutrients really matter, especially when you have an organ that's not functioning properly. So for kidney disease, it was super, super important. Even though, when we first came out with it, we would get lots of comments like, I would never feed that to my cat. Yeah, if your cat is healthy, do not feed it to your cat. Some of them are by prescription, and the kidney, both kidney for dog and kidney for cat, are by prescription. And why are they? Because they're not AFCO balanced. They're not. They're made to be unbalanced because that dog or cat is not functioning as a balanced individual. It's made for their shortcomings. But some of our foods, like the cancer diet that Janet's used, the cancer diet is not about restriction. It's the opposite. It's about flooding the body with so many antioxidants and healthy omega-3 fatty acids and clean, healthy meats, as well as really low carbohydrate. So it's almost ketogenic. And so it's feeding the pet, but not feeding the cancer. So most of our diets are more like that. They're more about super clean, healthy ingredients in the right proportions to support the body rather than restriction. The 3 that are by prescription only are the 2 kidney diets and the bladder diet, because they're not AFCO balanced, because they are geared towards an animal that is having an issue. But I think another component of the Medicus diets is the idea that it's not for life. Hasn't it become that way? Like we've seen cats with bladder issues. Once they go on CD diet, they stay on it for the rest of their lives. That's not how it's supposed to be.
No,
No.
thank you for saying that.
They even says it on the packaging.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually going to ask you about, because one of the things that I've learned, if we take it back to the kidney diet, which seems to be the most controversial at the moment. One of the things that I've learned is that I don't, generally speaking, want to put an animal on a quote unquote kidney diet until I absolutely have to, like stage 4 CKD kind of thing, because it is lower in protein and our dogs and our cats just aren't made to survive on a low protein diet. But what I'm hearing you say is that if we catch it early enough, we know something's going on, we can actually use this whole food Medicus diet, work on bringing the kidney back into balance, and then being able to transition them back to a species appropriate diet. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, if that kitty has stage 4 end stage kidney disease, he's going to be on it for the rest of his life. But there's so many animals that it's just starting, that the blood parameters are just a little bit off. Okay, well, let's use the kidney diet for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Give the kidney a break, and so that it can heal. Once it heals, then let's start transitioning him back to a species appropriate diet. It kind of goes to why are so many of these issues so rampant in our society, and kidney disease is so rampant in kitties because they're chronically dehydrated. Help the kidney lighten the load with Medicus kidney diets, and then keep adding moisture to their diet and getting them back in order again, get to the root of why they have this problem. Then they shouldn't be on it for the rest of their life. They should be on it when they need it. And then hopefully now let's transition them to a healthier, cleaner diet that is more species appropriate. And that is a big deal. Like we've seen that in the bladder diets, for example. It used to be struvites are when the pH is too high and oxalates are when the pH is too low. And so when CD diet came around, everybody started using it, which brings the pH down, which is great for struvite crystals. But what it did is it changed the population. And so now it's 50% oxalate stones and 50% struvite stones. And you could say, well, how did that happen? Well, it was veterinary induced because we just willy-nilly across the board, your kitty has crystals, he's blocked, you absolutely need to be on CD and you're just going to stay on it for the rest of your life. That was overtreatment. So now it took the pH of the urine and made it lower, which was initially great, but then it lended itself to oxalate stones. So what we're seeing now is the population of bladder disharmonies are different. It used to be all struvite. Now it's half struvite and half oxalate, only because we overdid it. And in veterinary medicine, it's called idiopathic. And idiopathic is just a fancy word for idiot. Like we overdid it. We overdid it. Or you could say iatrogenic, and iatrogenic is another fancy word in veterinary medicine to mean veterinarian induced.
Right.
So if you gave too many steroids, you would blow out their liver, and so you would call it iatrogenic hepatitis. Well, yeah, it's basically just a fancy word for caused by the medicine, caused by the doctor.
I know that's what I think of every time somebody's like, my dog's been on Apoquel for 3 years and now they have cancer.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, there is a better way. There's so many other things that we can do, and and back to the God bless veterinarians, because that's the tool that they had. This is a new tool. So this is a tool that if you look at our formulas, the ingredient decks read beautiful. So it's chicken and chicken liver and chicken hearts and egg and pumpkin, and it's all food that you understand versus comparing it to prescription kibble that is soy and corn and wheat gluten meal and
Hard
sawdust.
cellulose,
Hard cellulose.
tree bark.
Exactly. You can get to the same nutrient profile, but doing it with really good food.
Do you know if the kidneys regenerate just like all of our other organs in our skin and our bodies rejuvenate. All the cells regrow out, within a certain, I don't know if it's weeks, days, years, whatever, but pets too, I would assume, right?
Yes,
So does the kidneys, do the kidneys regenerate as well, like all the other organs of the body?
they don't,
They
unfortunately.
don't.
And
Okay.
the kidney is such an amazing organ because it's the ultimate filter. Like I look back, I look at my vacuum cleaner. How many times is your filter fabulous? Now imagine if that was in your body every minute of every day, you're having, 60 beats per minute of blood passing through this filter and it's being filtered. So the filter itself can be damaged, and it is damaged, then it's scarred. And that's when you start to get to stage 4, where it's irreversible.
Okay.
Or here's what I would say is in the beginning, when you start using a kidney diet or kidney herbs or anything like that, what you're doing is bringing down the inflammation to that filter. And most of the time, I would say probably 70% of the time, that's really what you're doing is bringing down the inflammation of that filter so now it can function well again, lightening the load on it. But if it's been going on for too long and too severe, that's when you get scarring, and literally the kidney will become smaller and filled with fibrotic tissue and have less filter to be able to filter the blood. And that's when we need to intervene with the right amount of nutrients. That's when I say, okay, we need to decrease the phosphorus level because they cannot bring phosphorus down on their own. And I think that we really need to appreciate and understand that changing the nutrient profile for an animal who's sick. So when I say nutrients, I'm talking like phosphorus, sodium, calcium, all of those sorts of things that we need to adjust them to lighten the load on the body so that the body can heal, so that that inflammation can start to come down. Like a big thing for kidney disease is omega-3 fatty acids. It is huge. You could go back to all the research and there's crazy amounts of beautiful published data on how important omega-3 fatty acids are in supporting the health of the tissue of the kidney. And unfortunately, what happens is when this filter starts to get blocked or clogged or inflamed, slowly but surely it starts to scar. And as it scars, now the body can't push as much blood through per minute. Now you start to get high blood pressure. And then it's this vicious cycle. If the blood pressure starts to rise in that kitty, now you're bombarding that delicate filter over and over and over again. And it's just this downhill spiral. And that's where we really need to intervene.
Do you have anything, Janet, or?
Nope, I am just being a healthy sponge and absorbing it all.
Okay.
You use the vacuum filter analogy in the store, in the shop. We always use a sponge. How it shrinks and it just gets hard and it just doesn't work as efficiently anymore. And no, I'm tracking with everything that you say and secretly wishing that our veterinary community locally, globally would really just start to look and learn, things differently. Going back to even reading the labels, you go to see your veterinarian, and as you said, Dr. Bessent, which is so true, I think sometimes we forget, but they use the tools that they have just like our human doctors do. And once upon a time, I was that pet parent that I did everything that my traditional veterinarian told me to do.
No, I agree. And I'm so glad you brought up the whole point about not being on these prescription diets for a long time, whether it's yours or whether it's the veterinary diet or whatever, because some of those diets are not complete and balanced. So you're pet is going to end up being nutritionally incomplete. And that can cause a whole nother host of problems if they're on this life. But so many vets tell their clients, your cat's going to have to be on this for the rest of its life. I don't know if they're just an idiot or if they don't read or all the above. I don't know.
It's the only tool they have. So that brings up a really great point that Janet talked about. They're feeding a poor quality diet that's dry, filled with carcinogens, lots and lots of magnesium and phosphorus, and so really laden with high content of minerals. So once you go to something like Medicus or even a prescription diet, you don't go back to that bad diet. The next step is now you go to a species appropriate diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you went from a veterinary perspective, they recommend CD. You go on CD, your cat does better, and they can't really send them back to the poor quality diet they were on before. And maybe they don't know anything more to get them to a species appropriate, healthy, whole food diet. And in veterinary practice, a patient comes in and they have to have a complaint. So why are you bringing your cat or your dog in? And then that, logically speaking, that's that vet's mission, is to fix that problem. And so very seldom are vets doing health and wellness. They're not. We don't. We fix disease. We have to fix a problem.
Yeah,
So
they're very myopic.
Yeah, that's why I love pet health consultants, because a pet health coach can teach you about health and wellness and supporting it and making changes with herbs or the right products like Janet's doing long before it gets to the point that you have to have a prescription diet or they're going to continue down this downward spiral. So I think that's why I totally support the health wellness coaches, because we need it. Like, who's out there doing it? Pet stores are. But unfortunately, with the pet store, people think you're just trying to sell them something. Instead of saying, I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm trying to teach you something, and I'm providing the solution to your problem. And so the more of us that are out there saying there's other options, and here's the other option, the more pet parents are going to do it. And all pet parents want is their animal to be healthy. You know, they don't want to start a store. They don't want to start a podcast. They just want their animal to be healthy. And so luckily, with more fabulous stores, with more pet health coaches, we can get more people out there that can help direct them in the right direction. And if your vet is of any substance, they should applaud that. They should be thrilled with that, because they fix the disease. Okay, well, now you support health and wellness, because that's not something that veterinarians are really taught to do. Veterinarians are focused on fixing the disease, either with really strong medicine that has lots of side effects, or with surgery, which has all its own complications.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, like you guys do, we could support animals 98% of their life with healthy food and the right lifestyle changes and using herbs and using more gentle things. And then when we need the big guns, great, we got it. And what I found is, when you need the big guns, if you've been feeding them right and doing all the right things, if they need Apoquel or they need something else, it would be very short-lived, just enough to help that animal kind of point them in the right direction. And then you continue on with health and wellness, rather than going down this path where you're always staying on these big drugs until the big drugs are worse than the.
Absolutely. So something that Pam brought up, and maybe we can kind of segue a little bit into the cancer diet with this, but I think this is also one of the reasons that I'm such a big believer in the idea that if we have an animal on a highly processed food, that oftentimes just by transitioning them to a species appropriate diet, we're giving the body room to breathe, to function in the way that it's supposed to function and do what it does best and heal itself. And one of the things that I mentioned Pam had kind of brought up is that when we look at these highly processed diets, what we generally call kibble, though I'm still shocked that there are still so many people out there that hear the word kibble and they think that's a brand and they're not feeding that brand. But the fact that the ingredients that these highly ultra processed foods are using are so poor and they are so laden with toxins, with pesticides and herbicides, with AGE, yes, with all of these things that just by we can't, even if we're going to, prescription kibble, we're still getting these really poor quality ingredients with all of these herbicides and pesticides and toxins and chemicals that we're not giving the body the space that it needs to be able to function properly. Moving on to, even if you do feel like, or your veterinarian feels like they do need a nutrient adjustment, moving on to a diet like Medicus, you're going to get the best of both worlds, basically. You're removing all of these pesticides, herbicides, all these toxins that are weighing the body down, and you're getting that nutrient adjustment that hopefully you only need for a short period of time. So if you want to, speak on that, Annie, that would be great. But I think that could also be a really great segue into the cancer diet, because even though I think it's true with any and everything going on with our pets, everybody freaks out over the C word. And that is one of the most, I think for most people, is the biggest aha moment that they could have, even more so than, oh, your cat has kidney disease or, your whatever is going on. Getting that diagnosis of cancer, that's when people are really like, now I need to realize I need to remove the toxins. I need to remove all the other things. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cancer diets all the Medicus diets are really clean. So if I get off track, take me back to cancer. I can tell you that we use the cleanest of proteins, but I'd rather show you with numbers. And so you can look up our biogenic amines. And biogenic amines are amazing. Do you guys know anything about that? Have you heard of it?
Yeah, heterocyclic amines, and I've
Nope.
heard of bad amines, but this is obviously the good amines, right?
This is biogenic amines are like putrescin and cardavacin. They're the chemicals that develop in meat as it ages and spoils.
Okay.
So you can test, is the meat clean or not clean? Is it like 4D meat would be really high in putrescin or cardavacin, and it would definitely show you with numbers that that is a poor quality meat. And if your animal is then eating those ingredients, those are some of the toxic qualities of the bad meat. So all of our meats have really low biogenic amines, which means that they're very healthy and fresh and clean. So not only can I tell you it and reassure you of it, but I can also even give you the numbers. That is quantitative. So you don't have to believe me. We can show you the data that shows it's really high quality meat. And that is a really big deal. And I think that the reason you haven't heard of biogenic amines and it's not really talked about very much, because if you tested kibble for biogenic amines, how bad would they be? They would be terrible. Because what is meat meal? Meat meal is rendered meat from dead, down, diseased, dying, rejected meat that would not be fed to humans because it's so poor quality, but totally acceptable for pet food. And so biogenic amines if we tested biogenic amines and all of our pet food, it would change the world, because that would be a reflection of the poorest quality meats that's being added to that kibble, mass kibble that you can buy 50 pounds for $20. Yeah, that's poor quality meats. So not only do all our Medicus diets have low biogenic amines, but then the cancer diet is super important because the cancer diet is really good quality meats. So you start out with the clean, wholesome ingredients. All of our fruits and vegetables are organic, so you know they're of the cleanest quality. And then we added a tremendous amount and just flooded that diet with antioxidants. Because what's part of the whole development of cancer, or you could also call it metabolic stress on a pet's body, is how much they have to get rid of antioxidants or get rid of oxidation free radicals that developed. So if we flood them with antioxidants, we can minimize how much the immune system has to fight free radicals so that it can keep cancer cells in check. So part of the cancer diet is flooding it with really fabulous antioxidants from so many different sources. So from lycopene from tomatoes and pomegranate and spinach and broccoli and all these amazing, highly antioxidant laden fruits and vegetables, but still in a species appropriate amount. Even though it's a lot of it, it's still a small percentage of the diet, like 10, 15, 20% of the diet. And still the majority of the diet is really good, high quality meats as well as organs. Then we added high omega-3 content. And omega-3 is good, healthy fats that are a great way to decrease carbohydrates by raising the fat, but we're raising clean fat, anti-inflammatory fat, rather than fat from inflammatory sources like seed oils. And then we put almost no carbohydrates in it. The only carbohydrate that are in either one of the cancer diets, chicken or beef, comes from the fruits or vegetables that are in that diet. So the cancer diets are like 3.9% carb and 3.7% carb. And the whole idea is that dogs and people, we can live on a ketogenic diet and produce ketones to support our brain health and our overall health. Cancer needs glucose. So if you're feeding a higher carbohydrate diet, you're feeding glucose that the body uses, but the cancer uses too. So by going with a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet, you're feeding the pet and not feeding the cancer. And that's a really a big deal because none of in fact, the most recent onco diet that just came out from one of it's still like 35 to 40% carbohydrates.
You
So
brought
you're
that
still
up.
feeding the
That
Yeah.
doesn't even sound like a cancer diet to me. That sounds like a
Kibble.
regular.
The
Right.
kibble.
Positive.
Exactly. It's the same. And so you're not really giving them any advantage. So that's when you look at our cancer diet, those are kind of the basis behind it. Species appropriate. So it is complete and balanced, flooded with antioxidants. If they get too much, big deal. They just pee it out. And the body doesn't have to work as hard. Ketogenic. So we're feeding the animal, not the cancer, as well as really high anti-inflammatory oils, which is fabulous. And when I say almost ketogenic, the reason that I use that term is true ketogenic diets are really high in fat, and most dogs will reject that, and cats reject it. So ours is not as high in fat, but super low in carbohydrates. So they still get into ketosis, just not in that kind of fat bomb sort of really greasy, icky diet sort of way. So
Hank rejected the keto diet. I tried that in the very beginning. And, he wanted no part of it.
Yep.
Loved
Yep.
his gently cooked raw and his freeze dried.
Yes.
So you also have in the dog line, you have a skin health diet and a sensitive stomach diet.
Yeah.
And then you have a metabolic health diet in the cat that we haven't talked about. And I know, especially, I think, I want to say it, is it the sensitive stomach diet? Is that the one that has the really more novel proteins in it?
Skin diet.
That's
So
the skin diet.
the skin diet is kind of twofold, kind of threefold. It's super clean, of course, so that many times, how many times do dogs have allergies and always have GI issues with it? It's almost always linked. And in my just kind of speculating, my speculation is it's the toxicity or the toxins that are in standard kibble that is negatively affecting the gut and negatively affecting the skin. So our skin diet is super clean, but then we use guinea fowl and bison liver as the protein sources. And then we also added evening primrose for the essential GLA. So we normally think that omega-3 fatty acids are really wonderful and omega-6 fatty acids are fine for calories, but tend to be more pro-inflammatory. Well, GLA is a omega-6 fatty acid, but it's really important for the foundation and the hydration of skin. So that's what sets our skin diet apart. It's almost like a novel protein diet, super clean, but then we added the evening primrose and krill so that we could nourish the skin at its root. And that's a great diet it's not forever. That is the kind of diet that you're going to put them on it. They're going to start doing better. Their skin starts to hydrate the way it should. They're healthy and vibrant. Okay, now let's start adding some healthy things back in. So we're not going to take them back to the old kibble they were eating before. Instead, now we're going to go to Janet and we're going to talk to her about, I want to add so we were on guinea fowl and bison liver. Let's add some beef and see if they tolerate beef. And you could add beef in, maybe even as treats, like a pure beef liver treat or a pure beef muscle meat treat, and then see how they do. No reaction. Their skin's still doing great. Okay, good. Now let's add another thing. And so slowly but surely you can start adding things in to see if you can take them from the Medicus skin diet to Simple Food Project and salmon. So you've got really clean beef and you have salmon as your omega-3 source that's also wild caught and really clean. So now we know we can take them from the skin diet to beef and salmon of Simple Food Project. So that's how I would use that recipe. And let's say they did have a reaction. Okay, no problem. Go right back on the Medicus skin diet, get them back under control again. And now you can check that one's off the list. I'm never going to use chicken again because they're allergic to chicken. So that is a tool that you guys can use or the pet parent can use to try to find a healthy food that's more their long-term option. Where the sensitive stomach diet is so, I can't say enough about it. I mean, every day we get pet parents sending in saying their dog has had a sensitive stomach their whole life and they're better than they've ever been. What's the secret to the sensitive skin diet? Really, really clean food. That's number one, species appropriate and really clean. But also it's really high in fiber. And so it's high in soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So it has psyllium in it. It has pumpkin seeds in it. It has really high fiber content, which what does the GI tract need? The GI tract needs higher fiber, not as sawdust, not as powdered cellulose.
Well,
Exactly. Yeah. Not as garbage, but real food that gives really healthy fiber. And they're going to poop more. Absolutely. So when they start the sensitive stomach diet, their guts are going to feel well and they're going to poop a lot. And that's great. That's what we want to have happen. And then we also added aloe to it, and aloe as the herb. is just really soothing to the gut. And then we have spore-forming bacteria in it. So Bacillus species that is shelf stable for a long, long time. And then we added chicory root as well. So it's kind of a high fiber probiotic diet, as well as really soothing with the aloe and the cinnamon and the ginger. And I kind of said, instead of breaking the sensitive stomach diet into like, this is for IBD and this is for gastritis and this is for chronic constipation, I just said, what's the common denominator here? We need clean food and we need high fiber, and then we need things that are going to soothe and bring down the inflammation of the gut. For whatever reason it's happening, those are the things that are going to fix it. And it's really holding true. I mean, pet parents nonstop tell us how wonderful the sensitive stomach diet is. And then the bland diet is literally just beef and rice, but it's really wonderful grass-fed beef. And then some herbs in it that calm the stomach. And that is for like if they have a flare-up. So if they have an acute pancreatic episode, go with the bland diet. You're going to do that for 3 or 4 days, get them back under control again, and then go to the sensitive stomach diet. And the bland diet is not complete and balanced, does not need a prescription because it's geared towards just short-term use, not long-term use.
Right. That's one of the things that I'm kind of glad you brought it up, though I'm probably going to reframe it a little bit. I love when people take their pet's health into their own hands. They realize I can do this, and they start making their own pet food. They do their research to balance it out. They do all the things, or they, hire somebody to provide them balanced recipes, all the things. I think that is absolutely wonderful. However, what we buy at the grocery store, oftentimes, even like what we're feeding ourselves, is not super high quality. We're buying, the industrial raised cattle meat where, it's just not as healthy as, a grass-fed, grass-finished steak or a free-range chicken, a chicken that's actually living outside, eating all of the worms and bugs that it wants to eat, and it can do all the things. Like what we're buying most of the time in our grocery stores for us and for our pets still isn't very clean. So especially when we have a pet that has started developing issues, we do, I think, just need to be that much more aware of the quality of the ingredients of the food. And I'm really glad you keep bringing up the quality of the ingredients, because I think that can be a linchpin. And like, you think you're doing everything right. You think you're feeding all, a species appropriate diet. You're doing all the things, but it's not high quality food. It's not organic. It's not grass-fed, grass-finished. It's, all the things that really can make a huge difference in a disease state.
Yeah, I agree.
Same is
100%.
true with
You were talking
buying like the bone broth from the grocery store, which is full of so much salt, preservatives, salt, sugar, which is, as we all know, is great, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes. Not great for digestive issues, for allergies, cancer. But sugar, salt, onion is a big one. We had this conversation 2 days ago, Monday. And, are you adding moisture because we're buying dry food? I buy the broth from the grocery store up the street. And I used to have at my counter an actual box of it. And I had circled all the ingredients that were not in their pet's best interest. And that's what we're talking about on this podcast, not just today, but all the time, is about what we want your pet to be the most healthy that they can be. And the information that is being shared with our pet parents is strictly for that purpose. It's to be a voice for them. And everything matters, just as we're hearing you say, Dr. Bessent, about you keep repeating, if people haven't caught this, you keep saying clean food, clean food. And that's what Jessica was circling back to, because, I can go to Costco and I can buy 15 pounds of meat for $15 to feed myself, or to put in a boiling pot of water to stick on top of my pet's food. But I'm sorry, there's a reason that meat is $1 a pound. There's a reason that Kirkland's, I'm calling it 40-pound bag of food, it costs $40, because it's full of unclean, low quality, yes, ingredients. And your pets deserve better. Then we don't end up with all these problems like skin issues, digestive upset, cancer, kidney problems. If you have a cat, feed your cat wet food. If you insist on feeding dry kibble, then at least let's incorporate moisture into the diet. It's just about wellness. And the best way to keep your pet well is to help them not get sick.
Give them the nutrients that they need. Like I think a
Yes.
great thing that Jessica said is that we're providing them what they need, and then the body picks and chooses what it needs. And what it doesn't need is either going to store for the future, or it's going to excrete in the stool or in the urine. So what? That's okay. We flooded the body with the good things, all of the tools the body needs to have health and wellness. And we as a society have gotten away from the idea that, for example, in apples, it's not just the apple and the sugar. There's all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the antioxidants, all the good parts of that wholesome food that we kind of forget about. We've stopped thinking about. But the body is requiring things. Like a good example of this is the kidney diet. Not to go back to that again, but a big thing that we did for years in the veterinary profession is minimize the amount of protein that they get. Because we say it's high protein, which taxes the kidney. But cats in particular, and dogs as well, have a basic requirement for amino acids. And if you aren't giving them the amino acids, then they break down their body to produce it. So that's why when you see those older kitties with kidney disease, they look like skeletons and they're super thin, because their body has catabolized their own muscle cells to provide the amino acids that animal needs every day. So if we don't provide it, they're going to do what they can to find it. And so the Medicus kidney diet is much higher in protein than the average kidney diet. So I think it's like 25-30% protein, which some vets push back on and say that's too high a protein. I go the opposite. They need amino acids, and if you don't give it to them in their diet, they're going to pull it from their own tissue. And how is that good for them? Because now you're circling the drain even faster.
Yeah.
Because they have to catabolize their own body tissue to support that need. And the same thing holds for other things, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Why do we crave different things, and why do animals crave different things? Because they're usually looking for that source. So, of course, that doesn't count.
No. One of the things that I love about your diets, all these Medicus diets, is even though your focus is on like helping a specific condition or illness, you still provide so many beneficial prebiotic sources for the microflora. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't pay attention to the microbiome, if it's not healthy, the body is not going to be able to heal.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you really tap into the really good source, the low glycemic sources of the fruits and the vegetables that can be that source of prebiotic material to support good healthy gut flora.
Yep. Hugely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I know Janet wanted to ask some more about herbs, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to. We've already been at this an hour, and I have another podcast recording I have to get to.
The bland diet.
Yeah. So you're talking Go ahead. Yeah, I would say that the sensitive stomach diet is really kind of a chronic pancreatitis diet. And acute pancreatitis to me is like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
So if you look at the enzymes that the pancreas produces every day, in kibble-fed dogs, their amylase level, so it's the enzyme that breaks down sugars, is off the scale, like 3 to 4 times the normal amount of amylase. And to me, that because there's always this debate that are dogs omnivores or are they carnivores? And of course, we say they're carnivores, but how do other nutritional minded people say that they're omnivores? They're omnivores in that they can be nutritionally abused. So they can tolerate nutritional abuse and still be alive. And it's when that nutritional abuse is like over the top, that becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's when you see acute pancreatitis. So I would say, and we don't know 100%. Everybody's always thought it's because of high fat levels, but in reality, the test that's done for pancreatitis is testing for lipase. But lipase is in the body longer than amylase is. So when you're testing it 2-3 days later and it's still elevated, the natural thought process is, oh, it's because they had too much fat. And I say the opposite. I say they had too much carbohydrate. The pancreas is inflamed, overwhelmed. It's the straw that broke the camel's back, and we need to decrease carbohydrates. Now, I'm not saying that it could be. Yeah, it certainly could be. So, to me, I would put pancreatitis in that symptom of nutritional abuse and that you need to get to a species appropriate diet. Now, I understand, Janet, that you're saying people are so scared. They're scared. They're scared to have any fat because their vet said it's all about fat. And so they're not going to give them any fat at all. And those dogs don't thrive. I mean, we need fat in our body. We need good fats for everything to function. All of our brain, our cells are all fat laden. And if we're not giving it to them, it's kind of in that same category of not giving them enough amino acids. They'll find it someplace. In those particular cases, I would gently say, how about we just start adding some of this sensitive stomach diet to your kibble, and then we'll gradually, slowly move them over because their pancreas is really inflamed. And that's why they're so sensitive and that they could flare up at any minute. Absolutely. So it is difficult to bring them around, but I guess a good thing to say is, how has it been working? Are they thriving? Do they look fabulous, or are they just surviving?
In one podcast I was listening to that they suspect it's the oxidized fats that
It's
make
possible.
the pets. Depending on what they ate, if it was an acute thing and they got into all the bacon grease or, whatever.
Well, that would make anybody sick.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I think I took the pancreatitis course that Dr. Steve Marson created for Dr. Judy Morgan's website. And he kind of had a combination of the two, that the abuse of a lifetime of too many carbohydrates and then the oxidized fats on top of the carbohydrate, because most kibble that we're feeding also is oxidized. The fats are oxidized at that point by the time they're eating it. And so kind of combination of the two.
Totally makes
Anything that kind of takes me away from the oxidized fat scenario is dogs can eat roadkill totally fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
they can.
That fat that's in that animal is just laying out in the road, oxidizing like no other. And they can eat that and not have a problem with it. So, but I think anything that's taxing the pancreas is going to lend itself toward inflammation, and that inflammation could go into acute pancreatitis.
For sure. Well, unfortunately, I think Janet's internet cut her off, but I do have to run to go to another recording. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Dr. Bessent, and hopefully we can get you back to talk some more about herbs, because I know, well, everybody is interested, but I know Janet, there she is also interested in herbs. So I was just thanking Dr. Bessent for all of her time and her wisdom and for being so generous with both.
Thank you
Yes. Thank you so
so
much.
much.
It's been
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, it'd be fun to do a webinar on allergies and GI issues, because they're almost always together.
Oh, yeah.
And
100%.
why is that? And there's so much we can talk about. Yeah, thank you.
Well, yes, and we absolutely do. And please check out all of Dr. Chris Bessent's work. She is, again, the founder of Herbsmith, the Simple Food Project, and Medicus Veterinary Diets. So do check first at your local indie pet store. Hopefully they are carrying one or all of those products. If not, ask them about carrying them. Thank you so much for your time again, Dr. Bessent.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Bye.